I know how y'all are doing it is very empowering, and I'd say very important. And with that being said, this reminds me, I took a quote from your paper. I forgot, is the I don't know if it's intersectionality and invisibility paper.
Okay, yeah, which I did with some colleagues.
Yes,
yeah.
okay. I want to ask you a question around this quote and how you feel about it now.
The one I haven't seen, so this is putting me on the spot. Don't ask me what page it comes from.
Okay, but so basically, I was gonna ask about your work. Where do you see yourself leaving a lasting legacy? But first, I wanted to talk about this quote. So you said, domestic violence and abuse casts a long and devastating toll. Despite welcome progress, it still seems sometimes to be understood as something that is too big to end or will be always with us. I don't believe that is true. How do you feel about that now? Or should I read it again?
Yeah, no, I remember that, and I think that was one of the quote. That was a quote specifically for me, right?
Yes,
yeah. And for people who won't have seen this paper, this is a paper that I and 3 other colleagues wrote together, and it was very much a dialogue, right? So we were in dialogue about how we think about these kind of issues, and we would, so in the paper there's all these quotes where we kind of talk about these things, and I think that's really true. I think it's like any social problem. Sometimes it feels too big. It's so vast, and that vastness often means we're a bit disconnected from it, right? We may not have directly experienced something ourselves, or even if we have, or people around us have, it just feels like we can't resolve it, and we just might be trying to survive it, right? Or kind of ride alongside it. And I think that's true. I think we constantly have that, and you see that in review systems. So people become quite unambitious, perhaps, about what they want to learn or find, because it doesn't feel like they could solve it anyway, right? So you end up with really kind of generic, or maybe we should get a bit more training for people. But that's that kind of power I was talking about, that kind of long shadow that casts itself. But I think we have to believe we can end violence and abuse, right? And we can. We know what makes the difference there in terms of attitudes, in terms of how we get support people to seek help sooner, how we ultimately try and prevent it in the first place, right? And some of that starts with education. It links to our gendered world, right? It's intersects with other identities as well, and other forms of power which make people more or less vulnerable. And I don't think anyone would be doing this work if they didn't believe they could contribute to the ending of violence and abuse. And it may be not in their own lifetime, but that doesn't mean that possibility that we're building, and that's where we remember who came before, right? So like activism around violence and abuse and its history, and where we might want to kind of continue that. I think that's so important. And it's something I talk about in my work, that there's this irony in review that it's really hopeful, right? You're dealing with tragedy, you're dealing with these awful circumstances, and you might also be dealing with really challenging learning because agencies didn't do something, or whatever. It's really hard, but actually the whole process is underpinned by hope. That hope that something not necessarily not good, but something meaningful could come out of tragedy, that you can maybe improve things for someone, the next person. And that's also what often motivates family, right? If you family can take part in these reviews, and if you talk to them, often obviously really mixed views on what they're for and how they work, but often what family is saying is like, I want my loved one to be seen, and I want something to change. I want this not to then affect other people, right? I want to see something shift, and I think that's really hopeful as well, right? There's something quite powerful about that possibility that we can do something different. We can make it better for the next person, and but it can feel hard to keep that in sight, right? When we're faced with it's an epidemic of violence, and particularly gender-based violence that we see every day. And in the current political context, it often feels like some people, clearly get away with some awful things.
I know. I'm glad you mentioned hope.
na na